अस्सलाम वालेकुम व्यूवर्स। आज हमारा टॉपिक है जिस पे डिस्कस करना है। मेन टॉपिक आर ह्यूमन राइट्स। ऑब्जेक्टिव लाइक डिफाइन ह्यूमन राइट्स, इसमें रिकॉग्नाइज बेसिक ह्यूमन राइट्स, appreciate the importance of human rights, conceptualize a rights-based approach to health, identify nurses' role in client-centered healthcare approach. Definition: human rights are the rights that all people have by virtue of being a human beings. Human rights are derived from the inherent dignity of the human person and are defined internationally, nationally, and locally by various law making bodies. In this layer definitions slide, I tell about the definition of human right. Human rights is defined as the supreme inherent and inalienable rights to life, to dignity, and to self-development. It is concerned with issues in both areas of civil and political rights and economic, social, and cultural rights, founded on internationally accepted human rights obligations. Rights, moral power to hold, rights to life, nationality, own property, rest and leisure, to do, rights to marry, peaceful assembly, run for public office, education, to omit, freedom from torture and cruel, inhuman or degrading punishment, freedom from arbitrary arrest, detention or exile, to exact something, equal protection of the law, equal access to public service, equal pay for equal work. I show this pic. Rights are things that protect us from harm. What are the basic rights you think any child should expect? Think of a baby that has not asked to come into the world. To be allowed to live the right of life, to be protected from harm, to be protected from disease, to have food and drink. Basic minimum things such as these that we should all expect to have wherever we live have become known as human rights. The United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948. Almost every country in the world has now signed the above agreement, saying they agree with five basic human rights. What is five basic human rights? I tell about this in this slide. Number 1, equality in rights. All people should have the same rights. Number 2, the right to life. All people should be allowed to live. Number 3, freedom from slavery. No person should be forced to work without fair pay and condition. Number 4, the right to a fair trial. People should be able to defend themselves if they are accused of something wrong. Number 5. Freedom of expression. People should be able to say what they want as long as it does not go against the law or another human right. Characteristics of human rights: universal, internationally granted, legally protected, protects individuals and groups, cannot be taken away, equal and indivisible, obliques states and state actors. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. By 1948, the United Nations new Human Rights Commission had captured the world's attention. Under the dynamic chairmanship of Eleanor Roosevelt, President Franklin Roosevelt Widow, a human rights champion in her own right, and United States delegate to the UN, the Commission set out to draft the document that became the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948. Roosevelt, credited with its inspiration, referred to the declaration as the International Magna Carta for all mankind. It was adopted by the United Nations on December 10, 1948. The member states of the United Nations pledged to work together to promote the 30 Articles of Human Rights that, for the first time in history, had been assembled and codified into a single document. In consequence, many of these rights, in various forms, are today part of the constitutional laws of democratic nations. Article 1 is right to equality. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act toward one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Article 2. Freedom from discrimination. Everyone is entitled to all the human rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or status. Article 3. Right to life, liberty, personal security. Everyone has the right to life, liberty and security of a person. Article 4. Freedom from slavery. No one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms. Article 5 are freedom from torture and degrading treatment. Article 5 included no one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Article 6 a right to recognition as a person before the law included everyone has the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. Article 7 right to equality before the law. All are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. All are entitled to equal protection against any discrimination in violation of this declaration and against any incitement to such discrimination. Article 8 title are right to remedy by a competent tribunal included everyone has the right to an effective remedy by the competent national tribunals for acts violating the fundamental rights granted him by the Constitution or by law. Article 9 freedom from arbitrary arrest and exile. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. Article 10 are right to fair public hearing. Included is everyone is entitled in full equality to a fair and public hearing by an independent and impartial tribunal in the determination of his rights and obligation and of any criminal charge against him. Article 11 right to be considered innocent until proven guilty. Everyone charged with a penal offense has the right to be presumed innocent until proved guilty according to law in a public trial at which he has had all the guarantees necessary for his defense. Article 11 right to be considered innocent until proven guilty. No one shall be held guilty of any penal offense which did not constitute a penal offense under national or international law at the time when it was committed, nor shall a heavier penalty be imposed than the one that was applicable at the time the penal offense was committed. Article 12 freedom from interference with privacy, family, home, and correspondence. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence, nor to attacks upon his honor and reputation. Everyone has the right to the protection of the law against such interference or attacks. Next is Article 13 right to free movement in and out of the country. Everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residents within the borders of each state. Everyone has the right to leave any country, including his own, and to return to his country. Article 14. Right to Islam in other countries from persecution. Everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. This right may not be invoked in the case of persecutions generally arising from non-political crimes or from acts contrary to the purpose and principles of the United Nations. Article 15. Right to a nationality and the freedom to change it. Everyone has the right to a nationality. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his nationality nor denied the right to change his nationality. Right to marriage and family. Men and women of full age, without any limitation due to race, nationality, or religion, have the right to marry and to found a family. They are entitled to equal rights as to marriage during a marriage and at its dissolution. Right to marriage and family. Marriage shall be entered into only with the free and full consent of the intending spouses. The family is the natural and fundamental group unit of society and is entitled to protection by society and the state. Article 17. Right to own property. Everyone has the right to own property alone as well as in association with others. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his property. Article 18. Freedom of belief and religion. Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief and freedom either alone or in community with others and in public or private to manifest his religion or believe in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. Article 19. Freedom of opinion and information. Included, everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of furnitures. Right, Article 20. Right of peaceful assembly and association included. Everyone has the right to freedom the peaceful assembly and association. No one may be compelled to belong to an association. Article 21. Right to participate in government and in free elections. Everyone has the right to take a part in the government of his country, directly or through freely chosen representatives. Everyone has a right to equal access to public service in his country. Article 21. right to participate in government and in free elections. The will of the people shall be the basis of the authority of government. This will shall be expressed in periodic and genuine elections, which shall be by universal and equal suffrage, and shall be held by secret vote or by equivalent free voting procedures. Article 20, Right to Social Security. Everyone as a member of society has the right to social security and is entitled to through national effort and international cooperation and in accordance with the organization and resources of each state of the economic, social and cultural rights indispensable for his dignity and the free development of his personality. Article 23, Right to desirable work and to join trade unions included. Everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and to protection against unemployment. Everyone without any discrimination has the right to equal pay for equal work. Article 23, Right to desirable work and to join trade unions included. Everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for himself and his family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection. Article 23, Right to desirable work and join trade unions. Everyone has the right to form and to join trade unions for the protection of his interests. Article 24, Right to rest and leisure. Everyone has the right to rest and leisure, including a responsible limitation of working hours and periodic holidays with pay. Article 25, Right to adequate living standard. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. Article 25, Right to adequate living standard, includes motherhood and childhood are entitled to special care and assistance. All children, whether born in or out of wedlock, shall enjoy the same social protection. Article 26, Right to education. Everyone has a right to education. Education shall be free, at least in the elementary and fundamental stages. Elementary education shall be compulsory. Technical and professional education shall be made generally available, and higher education shall be equally accessible to all on the basis of merit. Article 26, Right to Education. Education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. It shall promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship among all nations, racial or religious groups, and shall further the activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace. Article 26, Right to Education, included parents have a prior right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children. Right. Article 27, Right to participate in the cultural life of community, included everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts, and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. Article 27, Right to participate in the cultural life of community. Everyone has the right to the protection of the moral and material interests resulting from any scientific, literary, or artistic production of which he is the author. Article 28, Right to a social order that articulates this document. Everyone is entitled to a social and international order in which the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration can be fully realized. Article 29, Community duties essential to free and full development. Everyone has the duties to the community in which alone the free and full development of his personality is possible. Article 29, Community duties essential to free and full development. In the exercise of his rights and freedoms, everyone shall be subject only to such limitations as are determined by law solely for the purpose of securing due recognition and respect for the rights and freedoms of others, and of meeting the just requirements of morality, public order, and the general welfare in democratic society. Article 29, Community duties essential to free and full development. include these rights and freedoms may in no case be exercised contrary to the purpose and principles of the United Nations. Article 30. Freedom from state or personal interference in the above rights. Nothing in this declaration may be interpreted as implying for any state, group, or person any right to engage in any activity or to perform any act aimed at the destruction of any of the rights and freedoms set forth herein. Five categories of human rights. फाइव कैटेगरीज हैं ह्यूमन राइट्स की, कौन कौन सी वो इस स्लाइड में शेयर किया करती हूँ. सिविल राइट्स, पॉलिटिकल राइट्स, सोशल राइट्स, कल्चरल राइट्स, इकोनॉमिक राइट्स. सिविल क्या है, सिविल को थोड़ा डिटेल में करते हैं हम. द राइट टू बी ट्रीटेड एज एन इक्वल टू anyone else in society. Political, the right to vote, to freedom of speech and to obtain information. Economic, the right to participate in any company that benefits all and not to desirable work. Social, the right to education, health care, food, clothing, shelter, and social security. Cultural, the right to freedom of religion and to speak the language and to practice the culture of one's choice. Some civil rights. Some civil rights कौन कौन से हैं? Life, believing on religion, opinion, free speech, non-discrimination according to sex, marry, race, cultural background. Some political rights are vote in elections, freely form or join political parties, live in an independent country, stand for public office, freely disagree with views and policies of political leaders. Some economic rights are jobs, work without exploitations, fair wage, safe working conditions, form trade unions, have adequate food, protection against labor malpractice. Some social rights: housing, education, health services, recreation facilities, clean environment, social security. Some cultural rights: use on language, develop cultural activities, ancestral domains, develop on kind of schooling. Importance of human rights: human rights are important because the states affirmed the universal respect for inalienable rights and fundamental freedoms of each and every person, including the principle of the prohibition against arbitrary detention, the right to due process, and other civil and political rights, as well as social, cultural, and economic rights. Importance of human rights: these fundamental human rights should be a common standard of achievement for all the people and nations. They are the basic rights that all human beings should enjoy, respect, and protect. Sorry. International human rights law lays down obligations which states are bound to respect by becoming a parties to international treaties. States assume obligations and duties under international law to respect, to protect, and to fulfill human rights. The obligation to respect means that states must refrain from interfering with or curtailing the enjoyment of human rights. The obligation to protect requires states to protect individuals and groups against human rights abuses. The obligation to fulfill means that states must take positive action to facilitate the enjoyment of basic human rights. Through ratification of international human rights treaties, governments undertake to put into place domestic measures and legislations compatible with their treaty obligations and duties. Universal human rights should be applied to all persons without distinction of any kind. We are all human beings, so we are all entitled to enjoy these rights. Human rights are what reason requires and conscience demands. They are us and we are them. Human rights are rights that any person has as a human being. We are all human beings. We are all deserving of human rights. One cannot be true without the other. Rights based approach to health. The right to health does not mean the right to be healthy, nor does it mean poor governments must put in place expensive health services for they have no resources. But it does require authorities put in place policies and action plans which lead to available and accessible health care for all in the shortest possible time. To ensure that this happens is the challenging facing both the human rights community and public health professionals. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Mary Robinson Human rights Human rights concern the relation between the state and the individual. They lead to state obligations and individual entitlements. All human rights are interdependent and interrelated. Health is a fundamental human right, indispensable for the exercise of other human rights. Freedom from discrimination underpins all human rights. Promotion of human rights is a principal purpose of the UN. First expression of the right to health. The WHO Constitution 1946. The states parties to this constitution declare in conformity with the Charter of the United Nations that the following principles are basic to the happiness, harmonious relations and security of all peoples. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. The enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health is one of the fundamental rights of every human being, without distinction of race, religion, political belief, economic or social condition. Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948 Article 25.1 Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care and necessary social services. Example of the links between the health and the human rights. Human rights violations resulting in ill health. Reducing vulnerability to ill health through human rights. Right to education, right to health, right to food and nutrition, freedom from discrimination. promotion or violation of human rights through health development, right to participation, freedom from discrimination, right to information, right to privacy. Human rights violations resulting in ill health are torture, harmful radiation products, slavery, violence against women and children. Rights based approach to health follow the principles of availability, accessibility, acceptability, quality of health services. The right to health. Underlying determinants healthcare, availability, functioning public health, and healthcare facilities, goods, services, and programs in sufficient quantity. Accessibility, non discrimination, physical accessibility, economic accessibility, affordability, information accessibility, acceptability, respectful of medicine, respectful of medical ethics, and culturally appropriate, sensitive to age and gender, quality, scientifically and medically appropriate. Rights based approach, justice as a right, not as charity. A right based approach to development describes situation not simply in terms of human needs or of development required. Or of development requirements, but in terms of society's obligations to respond to the inalienable rights of individuals, empowers people to demand justice as a right, not as charity, and gives communities a moral basis from which to claim international assistance when needed. Kofi Annan, United Nations Secretary General. Client centered care, an approach to care planning and support which empowers individuals to make the decision about what they want to happen in their lives. These decisions then form the basis of any plans that are developed and implemented. Individuality, independence, client centered values. Individuality, independence, rights, respect, choice, dignity, privacy, partnership. How do these values influence aspects of social work and why? Nurses' role in client centered healthcare approach. The individual, someone requiring care or support. Families, friends, advocates, those of importance of the individuals. others around the individual, team members and colleagues, other professionals. Nurse role in client-centered healthcare approach. Evaluate formal ongoing. Assess needs, difficulties, strengths. Implement practice practicalities, communication, management style, organiz- organization, inductions, training, plan, day-to-day care, goals for the future. Maintaining a person-centered approach in complex or sensitive situations. For example, distressing or traumatic. For example, hospital appointment, individual out of regular environment. Doing something the individual perceived to be threatening or frightening, likely to have serious implication or consequence. For example, discussion about the future of a personal nature during personal care involving complex communication or cognitive needs, making an activity meaningful with for someone with dementia. An introduction to human rights. Introduction to human rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The idea of human rights did not begin with the establishment of the United Nations. Its roots can be found in all the world cultures and religions. However, the adoption of the Universal Declaration by the UN General Assembly in 1948 was a landmark achievement in world history, as it was the first time that the international community set down formal standards of human rights and freedoms that should be employed by everyone everywhere. The Universal Declaration proclaims that respect for human rights is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Since agreeing on the Universal Declaration, the international community has persuaded work the Declaration's ideals effective. The Universal Declaration is now available in over their 100 languages, which make it the most translated documents in the world. Basic documents on human rights. In 1948, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1966. Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 19 1966 International Covenants on Human Rights, International Covenant on CPR, International Covenant on ESCR. Special topics: torture, racial discrimination. B. Specific victim groups, gender and children. Specific victim groups, gender and children. General comments and recommendations by all treaty bodies included. General Comments 12, 1999, General Comments 15 on Drinking Water 2002. Civil rights, political rights, social rights, cultural rights, economic rights. Civil and political rights. Civil rights and political rights. Civil rights deal with standards of judiciary and penal systems. Political rights deal with specific components of participation in political power. These rights are often focused on when one talks about human rights. ESCR, the neglected two half of human rights. Economic rights deal with the sphere of human being working, producing, and servicing. Social rights deals with standard of living and quality of life for all persons, including those not participate in economic activities. Cultural rights deal with the cultural sphere of life, including ethnic culture, subcultures, art and science. Economic rights. Economic rights include social rights, cultural rights. including these not participating in economic activities. Cultural rights deal with the cultural sphere of life, including ethnic culture, subcultures, art, and science. Distinction of CPR and ESCR. Civil and political rights CPR objective is to ensure freedom and economic, social and cultural rights ESCR objective is to ensure equality. Relation Relational for challenge the distinction. Freedom requires both types of right and equality must be assumed in both. Negative freedom from profit attribute. Then ESCR positive right to drop criminals. Relation of challenging the distinction, obligation to respect, protect, and fulfill apply to all rights. Cost free individual freedom ESCR political or programmatic. Relations are all right eventually become justiciable as better they are defined. Immediate imaginations, progressive imaginations. Their relations are elements of immediate and progressive implications apply to all rights is varying degree. Absolute immutable, relative responsive to a changing conditions. All rights have a core of which the implementation is indivisible. Indivisibility of human rights. All human rights are universal, indivisible, and interdependent and interrelated. The international The international community must treat human rights globally in a fair and equal manner on the same footing and with the same emphasis while the significance of national and regional particularities and various historical, cultural, and religious background must be borne in mind. It is the duty of states, regardless of their political, economic, and cultural systems, to promote and protect all human rights and fundamental freedoms. The Vienna Declaration and Program of Action. Summary. Human rights are indivisible and highly interrelated. Indivisibility, interrelatedness, interdependence, cultural rights, social rights, civil rights, political rights, economic rights. Framing our human rights question. What are the historic and philosophical foundations for human rights? What are the historic and philosophical foundations for human rights? What are the underlying principles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? How does the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and our stories connect to human rights? How does the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and our stories connect to human rights education? Story of the evolution of human. How do we tell our story of the evolution of human rights and human rights education? We must recognize our ancestors and elders whose shoulders we are standing upon. Human philosophical vision. A search for common secular inquiry and team. 400 BCE East, Mozi founded Mohist school of moral philosophy in China. Importance of duty, self-sacrifice, and an all-embracing respect for others universally throughout the world. 300 BCE is Chinese sage Mencian wrote on the human nature. Humans are fundamentally good, but goodness needs to be nurtured. 300 BCE East has Antizio asserted relative anxiety and eradicates strife. Nothing is necessary to honor broad courts of justice among people. Let the oppressed man come under my statue to seek equal justice in law. Ancient Egypt. Explicit social justice, comfort the afflicted, refrain. Explicit social justice, comfort the afflicted, refrain from unjust punishment, kill no, make no distinction between the son of a man and importance and one of humble origin. Early Sanskrit writings in Indian. Responsibility of rulers for the welfare of people. None should be allowed to suffer either because of poverty or of any deliberate actions on the part of others. 300 BCE Ashoka of India, freedom of worship and other rights of his subjects. Other leaders from this area, impartial justice and social equality, and no caste should exist since all are from one tree. 16th century Hindu philosopher Chaitanya, there is only one caste, humanity. Sikh leader Guru Gobind Singh proclaimed recognize all human race as one. 10th century Al-Farabi, an Islamic philosopher, wrote The Outlook of the People of the City of Virtue, a vision of moral society in which all individuals were endowed with rights and lived in love and charity with their neighbors. Greek Greek philosopher, equal respect for all citizens, equality before the law, equality in political power and suffrage. Marcellus Cicero, universal justice and law guided human nature to act justly and be of service to others. Universal justice and law guided Universal justice and law guided human nature to act justly and be of service to others. This natural law binds all human society together, applies to every member of the whole human race without distinction and unique dignity of each person. French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau's man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. Precursors to 20th century human rights documents. 1750 BCE, Code of Hammurabi, Babylonia. 20,000 to 300 BCE, Old Testament. 551 to 479 BCE, Analect of Confucian. 4200 CE, New Testament. 644 to 656 CE, Quran. 1215, Magna Carta, England. 1400, Code of Locos Yacht, Aztec. 1648, Treaty of Westphalia, Europe. 1689, English Bill of Rights, England. 1776, Declaration of Independence, United States. 1787, United States Constitution. 1789, French Declaration on the Rights of Man and Citizen, France. 1791, United States Bill of Rights. 19th and 20th century of human rights based on natural rights. 1863, Emancipation Proclamations, United States. 1864 to 1949, Geneva Conventions, International Red Cross. 1919, League of Nations Covenant, International Labour Organization, ILO, created. 1920, women gain the right to vote in the U.S. 1926, Slavery Convention. 1945, United Nations Charter, San Francisco. 1947, Mohandas Gandhi uses non-violent protests leading India to independence. What are the human rights principles? The right that someone has simply because he or she is a human being born into this world. Core principles: human dignity, equality, non-discriminations, universality, interdependence, indivisibility, inalienability, responsibilities. What are the common myths about human rights? Human rights equals civil rights. Economic, social, and cultural rights, for example, healthcare and housing, are privileges. Human rights applies only in poor foreign countries. Human rights are only concerned with violations. Only lawyer can understand the significance of human rights. Universal Declaration of Human Rights, History and Current Status. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights (UDHR) was drafted by the UN Commission on Human Rights, chaired by then First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. The UDHR was adopted by 56 member nations of the UN General Assembly on December 10, 1948. Second point, December 10th is celebrated around the world as International Human Rights Day. The 192 member states in the UN upon a membership, agreed to educate their citizens about the principles of the UDHR. Most of these countries have incorporated the principles of the UDHR into their constitutions. The UDHR specifies minimum conditions of a dignified life. Sorry. Human rights instruments, organizations, and agreements working for protecting, promoting human rights. International Bill of Human Rights. International Court of World Justice. Secretary General Assembly, Security Council, Truthship Council, Secretariat Economic Social Council, Commissions on Human Rights, International Labour Organization, ILO, United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, United Nations Development Funds for Women, United Nations Educational, Science and Culture Organization, UNESCO, World Health Organization, WHO. Human Rights Instruments. This is Human Rights Instrument. World Bank, UNHCR, UNICEF, WFP, IMF, UNFPA, UNV, FAQ, UNDP, ILO, WHO, UNIDO, ITU, UNICEF, UNE, HCHR, UPU, UNESU, UNAID. The United Nations currently comprises 185 member states, all of which belong to the General Assembly. The General Assembly controls the UN finances, makes non-binding recommendations, and oversees and elects a member of other UN organs. It is the General Assembly that ultimately votes to adopt human rights declarations and conventions, which are also called treaties or covenants. For example, in 1948, when the UN Commission on Human Rights had completed its draft of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the General Assembly voted to adopt the document. The UN Commission on Human Rights International Bill of Human Rights defenses right of self-determination, prevention of discrimination, rights of women, rights of the child, slavery, servitude, forced labor, and similar institution and practice. Human rights in the administration of justice, freedom of information, freedom of association, employment, marriage, family, and youth, social welfare, progress, and development. Progress and development, right to enjoy culture, international culture development, and cooperation. Right to enjoy culture, international culture development, and cooperation. Nationality, statelessness, asylum and refuse, war crimes and crimes against humanity, included genocide, human trial law. Nations Welfare, Human Rights USA. Only 8% of adults and 4% of young people are aware the Universal Declaration. Are aware the Universal Declaration of Human Rights exists. After learning about the UDHR, a large majority, 83%, feel that the US should do more to live up to the principles of the UDHR. 2 by 3 of the people polled, 63%, say that the poor are usually discriminated against in US. Others discriminated against the disabled, 61%. The elderly, 54%, gays and lesbians, 51%, Native Americans, 50%, and African Americans, 41%. Human rights education. Human rights education is a means toward social change, a tool to transform a theory and practical applications into everyday social practice. In conflict situations and in peaceful building, HRE must be seen to benefit the target population's daily lives. HRE focuses especially on social goals and ideals that emphasize the dignity of all human beings and the need for laws and institutions that enforce those standards. In so doing, HRE contribution directly to the process of building a society based on freedom, peace, and justice. And child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have a little meaning anywhere. Without consent, citizen actions to upload them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world. Three formal state obligations for each human right. Three obligations of actions are respect, protect, fulfill. Four obligations of process are non-discrimination, adequate progress, participation, effective remedy. Formal state obligation for each human rights. Obligations are respect and meaning are the state must not interfere directly with people realizing their rights. Protect. Meaning the state must stop others from interfering with people's rights. Fulfill. The state must build legislations, institutions, norms to realize the rights. Non-discrimination. The state must not discriminate in meeting its obligation. Adequate progress. Progress must occur at a rate that shows commitment. Participation. People must be able to participate in realizing their rights. Effective remedy. There must be a remedy for a violation of obligations. Identifying state obligations. Obligations are respect, right to education, don't ban children from school, right to a fair trial, don't imprison without trial, protect, right to education are tackle household gender bias, prevent bribery of judges, obligations are fulfilled, non-discriminations, adequate progress, participation, effective remedy. Right to education are built schools, train teachers. Non-ethnic bias in education budget. Raise enrollments by X% by 2005. Community role in local schools. Make a complaint procedure accessible. Rights to a fair trial. Don't imprison without trial. Prevent bribery of judges. Build courts, train judges. No racial bias in sentencing. Reduce case backlog by X% by 2006. Citizen, jury and public access. Rights of appeal against mistrial. Realizing the rights depends on more than the state. Resources and capacity. Culture, customs and norms. The strength of civil society. External impacts and pressures. Other non-states actors. People and their rights. The state, private sector, the media, civil society, international actors, civil society. Multi-actor responsibilities. Education in India. Parents' obligation must be willing to send the children to school. Indicator are percentage of parents who think education is important. Finding percentage of environment 89% for girls, 98% for boys. State must provide adequate facilities. Percent of schools with poor facilities. 60% leaking roof, 89% non-working toilet, 59% no drinking water. Community must support school and teacher. Percent of schools with community meetings. In 49% of schools, no meeting for over 1 year. Media must report neglect of basic education. Percent of newspaper article on topic. In 1 year, 8,500 articles on foreign investment, 2,700 on defense, 60 on rural education. What roles can CSO plays? Obligations examples, CSO examples. Obligations are respect. Example are don't imprison without training. CSO roles are monitor if there is access to lawyer, raise awareness on rights of detained. Protect. Example are prevent bribery of judges. Monitor salaries, research other pressure on judges. Prevent bribery of judges. CSO role are monitor salaries, research other pressure on judges. Obligations are fulfilled. Example are build courts, train judges. And as CSO role are set target for training of judges, provide human rights training. Non-discriminations example are no racial bias in sentencing. CSO roles are set targets for training judges, provide human rights training. Indicators of ethnic political bias in sentencing highlights in media. Adequate progress. Reduce backlog of cases. CSO role are monitor backlog, set targets for reduction. Obligation of participation. Example are citizen jury and public access. CSO role are gain respected voice in legal community. Ensure CSO consulted. Obligation effective remedy. Example are right of appeal against mistrial. CSO role are monitor appeals lobby case, provide legal aid. Tell about basic human rights. An introduction to basic human rights. Humanity will not enjoy security without development. It will not enjoy development without security. And it will not enjoy either without respect for human rights. A clear definition of human rights, yes and no. The development and interpretation of what are human rights and how to protect them is an evolving process. Yes, human rights are existing laws. standard conventions and common practices. No, they are still evolving. Some are aspirational, not immediately realizable, others remain contested ideas. A family of human rights: civil, political human rights, fundamental, natural, inherent, and inalienable. First generation human rights cannot be taken away. Right to life, liberty, justice, freedom of expression, economic, social, cultural rights. Second generation human rights: aspirational, groups rights. Third generation environmental development rights. Some of these are contested, for example, self determination. Human rights and the law. Human rights have evolved through customary, natural, and international humanitarian law. Human rights have evolved through a customary, national, natural, and international humanitarian law. Human right protection. Protection of the state has evolved into protection of its people. Human rights security. Human rights were also born out of the need to ensure a peace and security between states. Human rights and international humanitarian law. Human rights were also born out of intel humanitarian law established largely by the founder of the International Red Cross in Geneva to govern the conduct of the war. But the Second World War laid bare the absolute failure of the previous international order. Conventions on the conduct of war, as well as the ability to protect minorities and nationalities. It directly led to the creation of the United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the UN General Assembly on December 10, 1948, is said to be the conscience of the world. It is the most translated document in the world. It is the global standard and conveys the right to life, liberty and security, freedom from torture, the right to free movement, as well as the right to free expression. It makes clear that all individuals have a bright right and are not simply subject to the whims of the state. The Universal Declaration was followed by two legally binding covenants: International Covenant on Political and Civil Rights, International Covenant on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights. Collectively, they form the basis of international human rights protection and are known as the International Bill of Rights. State obligations: immediate, progressive realization, the obligations to respect, the obligation to protect, the obligation to fulfill, non discrimination, international obligations, human rights. It's the implementation, stupid declaration, and legally binding covenants are one thing, but how are rights monitored and properly granted? The UN human rights monitoring process is currently built mostly upon annual reporting. Countries submit reports to the UN. The latest Philippine report to the UN was roundly praised by the Philippine government and condemned as a whitewash by many NGOs groups. All UN bodies are concerned with human rights, but the main ones are the United Nations Commissioners for Human Rights, Human Rights Council, the 7 treaty monitoring bodies are: 1. Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Number 2 are Human Rights Committee. Number 3 are Committee Against Torture. Number 4 are Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. Number 5 are Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. Number 6 are Committee on the Rights of the Child. Number 7 are Committee on the Rights on the Protections of the Rights of all migrant workers and members of their families. Many people, including many within the UN, are looking at ways of improving the monitoring and implementation process. The work of NGOs is already highly recognized and appreciated. But many believe the media could and should be doing a lot more to help, particularly those media in problem countries. Reporting for rights. Whereafter all do universal human rights begin in small places close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood he lives in, the school or college he attends, the factory, farm or office where he works. In this topic, I tell about the human rights law, human rights introductions, and introduction to human rights. This one, and the laws about human rights. I hope you like this video.